Welcome to another episode of Silmarillion Sessions. We're your hosts, Dr. Michael Thompson, Mr. William Lassiter, and we are going to talk a little bit more about the death of Feanor today. Some interesting observations about that, and potentially some other things that we come across. So, William, why don't you kick us off here? What do we want to notice yet from the death of Feanor?
Yeah. Well, we're still here in chapter 13 of the Return of the Noldor, and last time we had talked about that death of Feanor, and he dies fighting the Balrog, Gothmog, and then it says that his body, he had neither burial nor tomb, for so fiery was his spirit that as it sped, his body fell to ash and was borne away like smoke, and his likeness has never again appeared in Arda. Neither has his spirit left the halls of Mandos. We had a little bit of a discussion about that. In some ways, it reminded us of the death of Saruman, when Saruman dies and he looks towards the west, and then the wind comes and blows the smoke away. And we talked a little bit about how this fiery life led to this strange and rather inhuman, almost unholy way of dying. The dangers involved of being so committed to something or so filled with wrath or so filled with anger, and that was in the last discussion we had. But in the time in between, I got to think about some other things, and it just occurred to me that, is it possible that there's another read on this? So I got to thinking about two things that I'll share here. Let's see if I can share a screen. The one is from the book of Revelation, and let's see, share this. The book of Revelation, this is Revelation 3. It says, the writings to the various churches. It says, the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things saith the Amen, God, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. And that came to me in the sense that we would like to think that we're removed from these passionate attachments or these powerful decisions or these affections for things that drive us. And certainly it's cautionary not to make anything in the place of the Lord, as Feanor puts the Silmarils on in the place of the Lord, breaking of the first commandment and all that. But on the other hand, this is a warning in the opposite direction, that if you try to sit on the fence and not choose one side or the other, isn't that equally lethal? Because it says, because you are neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. King James translation, by the way. That seems to be a warning to some degree as well to consider. And then the other thing that came up was this passage out of our favorite guy, Dante Alighieri. This is from the Inferno 3 here at the Digital Dante site. Great website, by the way. Digital Dante is awesome. But the text and the translation, I will not attempt the Italian so that I don't make your ears bleed. But here he is just about to enter into hell. He's got the sign over the door, right through me, abandon every hope, ye who enter here, right through me is the way into the suffering city. And outside the gates, he hears all this crying and wailing. And he sees a banner, people chasing banners left and right. And he says, let's see. He sees people basically that didn't decide one way or the other. And so they're essentially on the banks, not going into hell, but not also going to heaven. And let's see if I can find the passage now. And why would they be there at the gates of hell? Yeah, here it is. Master, what is it that I hear? Who are those people so defeated by their pain? This miserable way is taken by the sorry souls of those who lived without disgrace and without praise. They now commingle with the coward angels, the company of those who were not rebels nor faithful to their God, but stood apart. And the Italians over here, but like I said, I'm not going to attempt that. The medieval Italian, not my thing. So the question then is about Feanor and about this whole like choosing sides or not choosing sides is how do we distinguish between Feanor, who obviously seems to have done something very wrong in putting the Silmarils ahead of the god? How do we engage in the world and engage in decisions and make choices and put ourselves behind a cause or behind an issue without making that issue into the Silmaril that we then turn into a burning ball of fire for, I guess. That's kind of what I was thinking.
That's really interesting.
Any insight into that?
We're going through that, looking at again the text of the chapter here. It's it says specifically the
Sorry, yeah.
essentially thus passes Feanor, from the Noldor, from whom came their was it their greatest, the mightiest, thus ended the mightiest of the Noldor, of whose deeds came both their greatest renown and their most grievous woe. Greatest renown and most grievous woe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so it was just the implication, not the strong statement that is always the case, but the implication that, with this great power comes not great responsibility, like Spider, but great power is just great power. And it comes great things and really terrible bad things, right? It can power what we're doing right now, and it can be Chernobyl and Nagasaki, you know. I mean, I think it's that kind of, and it's not
Yes.
an allegory of an atomic bomb. I mean, Tolkien's very much against allegory, but the idea is the applicability of that principle is, himself, Feanor himself is this kind of atomic power. I mean, the greatest renown. He made the Silmarils. He was able to replicate something godlike. Right, the Silmarils are as though living light, like living jewels. Um, but he got really messed
Mm-hmm.
up,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But he parasite flame. He's not in the middle ground, and this is
Yeah. Yeah, he
what's
did. No, he
interesting
did.
is what
Absolutely.
happens next with what his sons do. So he holds this. We say like he's kind of this Captain Ahab thing. He's driving everything into ruin, all the world damned.
Oh, yeah.
But even at the death of Feanor, an embassy came. So Morgoth comes, fakes, hey, let's treat. I'm going to surrender. We'll even give you a Silmaril. Just please lay off. I'm hurt. It hurts. Yeah, but he sends a bunch of Balrogs, and his sons get ambushed. Right then, the brothers of Maedhros, the eldest, gets captured.
Mm-hmm.
So both Morgoth's team and the Sons of Feanor build up a bigger army than was originally agreed because neither one trusts it. Each one knows the other side's going to try and betray the truce. Um, but Morgoth sent even more than they did. Plus, there were Balrogs. And Maedhros was ambushed, and all his company were slain, but he himself was taken alive and brought to Angband. And the brothers of Maedhros drew back,
Mm.
fortified a great camp in Hithlum, but Morgoth held Maedhros as hostage and sent word he would not release him, etc., etc. Anyway, the point is, they went to go fake a treaty, fake agreeing to the fake offer of truce from Morgoth. They do this tepid, lukewarm. They do this middle ground kind of maneuver, planning to. They begin conniving. How can they trick Morgoth? Essentially, how can they trick Morgoth
Mm-hmm.
rather than either driving straight forward or giving up and going into the west? Because that's of course what he proposes: is you will go back home, right? Go back and try and reconcile with the Valar. Leave me alone. So it's interesting. He kind of gives them the offer, offers them the chance to repent. The chance to repentance comes even from Morgoth, right? To them, they have an open door, maybe, um, but they don't do that. They don't charge full on. They don't assault Angband again, but they figure maybe we can try and trick the embassy, um, and take on the Balrogs. But they don't charge straight
Hmm.
on. It's not the same. I'm seeing a contrast in the kind of behavior that we just saw with Feanor. He charges on ahead, everybody behind, because he's a flaming fireball, just shooting right into the ranks of the enemy, and is ultimately consumed and destroyed, obviously. But he lays it on it, and it's not like he dies; he burns up then and there when the Balrog strikes him down. He's covered with wounds. His sons bear him off, and I mean, kind of like again, there's another very strong similarity to also in terms of the circumstances of his death to Thorin. Right, Thorin charges out at the last minute, breaks down the walls, charges out against the goblins and all of
Hmm.
that are attacking the Holy Mountain, and he dies. He's covered with wounds,
Hmm.
and the dwarves bear him off, and he gets to bid farewell to the Hobbit, to Bilbo, and he says, if more of us valued, good song and good food and cheer over gold and hoarded stuff, it'd be a happier, it'd be a merrier world. Um, right. Feanor doesn't die like that. Feanor says, "You all seek my vengeance. I hold you thrice over to the oath that we've swore against the gods and all." Like he to the very
Yeah.
end, he is I don't know, that kind of
Yeah.
intense. Um, and they hold to it, but they don't have the same spirit.
Yeah.
They're holding to this oath, but they're not as mad as him. They're not mad. He's
No.
he's completely off his bunkers. Right? He's completely bonkers, right? He's just absolutely
Yeah.
maniac.
He's literally
They're not
consumed.
maniacs,
Literally consumed with
and so
rage.
they try and connive. And to me, that seems like this kind of middle way, this miserable way, questo misero modo, in a certain way, and they pay for it, right? The Maedhros gets taken in. But it's an interesting point you raise up. Like, which is better? Is it better to
Yeah.
be a maniac
Yeah.
that just drives everything into the ground, or a milksop who just doesn't really do anything?
I mean, if we look forward in the lore, if we look forward to characters later on, especially to
Mm-hmm.
characters like say Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings, or to Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings, these are characters that continue to fight in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I suppose you could say Elrond too. They continue to fight in their own way an evil that just will not go away. It just won't quit. The fire that never dies in Mordor. And they continue to fight it, but they don't, neither, those three characters don't seem to be consumed with anger towards it. Even Gandalf doesn't seem to be consumed with anger towards it. You know, so I guess the question is, how does one not
Right.
become, like, say, a Denethor, for instance, or how does one not become a Feanor in one's response to the perpetuity of evil that just doesn't seem to quit? You have to make a decision to stand against the evil, um, and hopefully you don't make the decision to join with the evil. But if you make the decision to stand against the evil, then how do you do that and not be consumed the way Feanor is consumed? Because I think you're absolutely right in saying that he's kind of like a Victor Frankenstein in this. He's kind of like uh, the Tasmanian devil almost.
Yeah.
This is sort of like irrational hatred
Right.
and anger that just goes
Yeah.
crazy eventually. Mania, literally,
Right.
like
No,
Achilles
it's
fighting the river in Homer's Iliad.
I think that's
And I don't know. I'm just pondering that because it seems to be a problem current, and that's kind of why it's been on my mind. The problem current is I think it's unwise to simply sit back and say, I don't want any part of these issues. This issue of genocide, the issue of abortion, the issue of homelessness, the issue of civil rights, these things. I don't want any part of it. I'm above all that. I'm just not going to engage in it at all. That seems to be unwise because one is, in a way, uh,
yeah.
exercising
Well,
a certain level of sloth. not doing one's
Exactly.
moral duty as a political figure, you know. But at the same time, you can't jump in there and get so consumed with a cause, even a righteous cause, like the pro-life cause, for instance, get so consumed with a cause that eventually everybody becomes an enemy. Anybody who gets in your way, anybody who even slightly suggests that there might be another side of the issue
Right, which is the
becomes
oath of
the enemy,
Feanor,
and you
essentially.
just tear them a new one,
Right.
you know.
Anybody who steps in the
Both seem to be
way.
really,
Right. Or the
yeah,
gods, or
go tear
our
more
brothers
guys
and
one.
sisters. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
if it gets in the way
right,
of us getting the
right.
Silmaril in the most direct way possible.
Yep,
Um, then we'd slay them. And how
precisely,
not to become that? Because I think that's
precisely.
very important.
Yeah. I mean, even from a familial situation, he's just, yeah, from a familial situation, he makes life really miserable for his sons too, because they're bound to that oath, and they all end up in some way suffering from it. I mean, imagine being the son of a guy like this. It'd be like, what is that movie, Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford, where his son just has to endure his father. It's just completely, you know, um, but a righteous, sort of a righteous railing against modernity that this guy does, Harrison Ford does in the movie. But his son, I think it's River Phoenix plays his son. His son just has to suffer the fact that his father is Nuck and Fuds, you know, and that's a similar thing with Feanor here. That Feanor and his sons all have to endure the fact that Daddy, you know, Daddy, why are you so angry? Shut up, you're my enemy. You know? It's just it's really quite stunning to me. But it does raise that question in modernity. How does one give assent to a cause, even a cause that's very obviously right, uh, like killing of children? Probably, is most people would agree that it's a bad thing to go and put a bullet through the head of a child. Probably most people would agree on that. Um, but when you start engaging in certain things so much so that anybody who even suggests that there might be a nuance becomes the enemy. I mean, even the people that would go and inflict harm on the innocent, to some degree, need to be prayed for, right? The edict is to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid being consumed by that rage or consumed by that despair, like Denethor is? It just kind of struck me, especially in this political climate, leading up
Yeah,
to
no, I think that's really
our
interesting because
political
this
festivities
is where
next
I
week.
see also the massive difference between Aragorn as Tolkien wrote him and Aragorn as he is cast and depicted by um, in Jackson's film. Because Aragorn
Oh,
there is absolutely
absolutely,
lukewarm.
absolutely. Say more, please.
He's the modern man who's like, oh, I don't really want to. I don't know. What if I become a bad guy? That's just not Aragorn in the real film. In the real story, Aragorn has been trained because this is. I mean, I know why, and the differences between somebody who understands what lineage and patrimony mean, and how you've been raised for this moment your whole not only your whole life, but you've generations of people have been training for this moment. You literally were born ready, right? And somebody who has no concept of that, who thinks certain class of people are just parasites on society, and so he cannot conceive of something outside of the bourgeois norm of angsty emo modern kid. Um, and so that's how he directs Aragorn to be. Um, and Viggo Mortensen's really good at playing that kind of character. He's done it before. The Last Hidalgo. It's that kind of thing. But that's to me the big difference. Aragorn has this firm resolve, unwavering commitment, but he's not burnt up with these. He's not driven by the passions in this. He's indecisive about how to carry this out.
Hmm.
you know, what do we do with this company that's got diverse interests? I've got, the fellowship. Do we go this way? Do we go that way? Do we split up? Do we, there's no good way. And of course, I think Tolkien beautifully shows the futility of human choice in that chapter where every decision Aragorn makes has gone wrong that day, and two of the hobbits get carried off by orcs. Boromir's slain by the
Hmm.
orcs. Two other hobbits escape and go wandering off on their own little on their own 20 toesies across into enemy territory. And what's an elf and a dwarf and a scion of a deceased
Yeah.
royal lineage to do? Well, at this point, the dice are cast, and we just have to follow. Here's the only thing we can do, and that's try and rescue Merry and Pippin. But the futility of human choice and planning, I think, is shown very beautifully in that. So in
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
ways, there's almost I wonder, and I don't know, but I wonder if there's something to do with, I don't want to say following the course chosen for you, but not relying so much on your own, what you think, your own inflated sense of capacity, of what you can actually do and control. Um, but rather cultivating an internal resolve and then
Hmm.
doing the things you actually can with the circumstances as they are, rather than trying to force the issues, I guess. And I mean that's a theme also in just to go with, okay, this, I mean, I suppose we're kind of, there's, my mind has now been, I'm conditioned here, I've been set up, I've been primed. Viggo Mortensen again, other film, Mr. Fantastic or something, Captain Fantastic, right? Similar to Mosquito Coast, jaded with American consumerism. We're going
Right.
to go off, we're going to create our little family
Right.
commune in
Right.
the woods. Okay, there's a difference between recognizing that things are not right with society and maybe even, retreating to the hills. Many peoples around the world throughout many periods of history recognize that sometimes that's just a sound policy, right? When marauding bands of, Mongolian hordes come through, maybe retreating to the hills is actually a good thing to do, right? But between going, backing away from a dangerous situation or problematic situation, fleeing Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, that's probably a good thing to do. There's a difference between there's all the world, difference between that
Yeah.
and then trying to bend things to your will, which is, of course, the theme of why Captain Fantastic doesn't work. The theme is,
Mm.
hey, doing that doesn't work. Just like Mosquito Coast, right? Harrison Ford goes off. Like, in principle, your criticism isn't wrong, and it might even be that your initial idea of the solution isn't, is only slightly perverse, but it's then what you do with that when you try and then become this master and commander of your own situation that things just get messed up. Um,
Hmm. So in a way, it's
right.
like
You do
making
away with the
yourself into
idols.
the
By all
god.
means, smash the idols,
Uh,
but then you set yourself
yeah.
up as the god. And this is precisely what Galadriel. You mentioned Galadriel. This is precisely what Galadriel
Mm.
resists. Is I would tear
Yeah.
down the Dark Lord and set myself up. If you gave me the ring, no, 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 no. Right?
Yeah. That's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I sometimes wonder too. I mean, I am convinced that one of the major themes in Tolkien is the theme of love. You know, he has a number of different themes in there, and I think the proper what the proper form of love, I suppose you could say, is kind of what he's concerned with throughout all of his works, so that he's showing you different images of how one should love. There's a great passage from Faramir, I think, where Faramir talks about how the soldier doesn't love the sword,
Right.
but he loves the thing that he's defending and uses the sword to defend it. I think it's something like that. I butcher it, obviously. But even that passage you referred to of Aragorn, where he's deciding what to do next, it's a classic example of what you're suggesting between the book and the movie. In the book, there's a scene that stands, or I mean, in the movie, there's a scene that stands out where Viggo Mortensen sees the piles of armor and bodies burned of the orcs, and he gets angry and he kicks a helmet and yells and then falls to the ground, primarily because he actually broke his foot in the filming. But that overreaction almost has always struck me as like, that's not really, I don't know, that's not Aragorn to me. Because he was making a judgment, so to speak, about following the hobbits, but then he gets overly angry that he's not able to find them. and therefore reacts and kicks that helmet and breaks his foot. But in the book, he never does anything like that. In the book, he makes this judgment about what best to do because everything else has gone wrong and been out of his hands. And then he says something to the effect of, we should follow those who are most in need, that we should help those that are most in need. And that's why we should follow these two hobbits that have been captured, because the ring has gone out of my hands, but the two that have been captured are still in need. And so he makes this decision in some ways based on love, not based on anger or fear.
Important.
And that's always stood with me. The difference between movie and book, but also primarily what I'm talking about here, which is the idea that Tolkien is developing these images of love throughout his text.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's the bottom line right there.
I think you hit it on the head. And I'm trying to think, like Faramir is another example where the film does him as much more father wound issues than in the book. But in the book, so we're talking book Faramir here. This isn't a critique of one versus the other, but to clarify, focusing on book Faramir, the actual written Faramir in the Lord of the Rings, as Tolkien composed him. He also is trying to do the right thing, and he has to make a very hard decision. And he does it at great cost to himself. You could say similarly, Éomer does the same thing. He has to weigh the fate of Aragorn and company. Does he haul them in to the Golden Hall, or does he let them go about the lands moreover with 3 other horses? Well, he decides this is the best thing to do. Why? In both those cases, I would say it's probably the same as like what you just said. Aragorn makes this. Well, we have to. These 2 guys we know were captured. They're in. Sam and Frodo are potentially in danger, but they're in God's hands now, essentially, right? And it's beyond our reach. But we know Merry and Pippin have been captured, and if they're still alive, we have to assume to the degree that they're still alive, we have a duty and obligation to rescue them.
Right.
So that's what I must do. In many ways, I can kind of imagine inside Aragorn being like, "Oh, thank God!
Yeah,
I don't have to make a decision. It's very clear what to do." Because for the last 2 chapters, he's been like, "I don't know, what should we do? Should I stay or should I go now?" Because when all of a sudden you find yourself in charge of a very complicated, complex, small, situation where a small number of people are relying on you, I would say it's probably much more difficult than having to govern and judge the fate of an entire kingdom. Right? In some ways, the issues become clearer with that kind of massive scale or distance. But when there's just 9 of you, or 8 of you at this point, and you've got to make a decision that is going to change the fates of each one of these particular 7 faces in front of you, that's a harder decision to make. And Providence forces his hand to be, and it is a decision based on love. I think is the other way, because why does that work psychologically and also like narratively? That works because it gets the whole situation out of planning, out of his head, out of Aragorn's head, and into immediate clear call of duty, without getting angry, without wrath, vengeance, that kind of thing. Just, you have to act from love now. Yes, here it is. My heart speaks clearly at last. That exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you called that up.
There it is. Go ahead. You froze.
Obi-Wan, you're our only hope.
Okay. This is the passage that I was just looking it up while you were just commenting on this. He says, my heart speaks clearly at last. The fate of the bearer is in my hands no longer. The company has played its part. Yet we that remain cannot forsake our companions while we have strength left. Come, we will go now.
Yes.
So my heart speaks clearly at last, right? In other words, he has clarity of heart because suddenly you're right, the fate or providence has taken one aspect away, which is the ability to help Frodo and Sam. But also it's thinking clearly because he's thinking with what love requires, which is the not forsaking companions, not killing your kindred when they stand in the way of you in the Silmarils, you know, not going into an ambush because you're so hell bent for leather, um, not sacrificing your own son, because
Right.
you're throwing everything at the enemy the way the Denethor does. And that goes back to, I think, also what I brought up originally, which is Book of Revelation and Dante. In Book of Revelation, this this idea that I will spew you out of my mouth because you're neither hot nor cold. It's not about making, I conjecture, it's not about making the right cause to get behind or supporting the good or true or beautiful or being correct in your political opinions. It's not that. It's that you're doing the best you can to operate through love to make the
Yes.
best decision for people around you. And you're neither cold nor hot with respect to what is required by love. It's not that you're cold or hot with respect to supporting my works and my law and that kind of thing. Or even, or even defending God. I don't think that's what's being said here in Revelation. It's not that you're cold or hot in defending
Hmm.
God. God can defend himself, for crying out loud, or whatever you want to say. But it's you're neither hot nor cold with respect to what love requires. And that's why you get spewed out of the mouth of the divine, I think.
Hmm.
And I think probably the same thing in Inferno. This passage here in Inferno, where Virgil says, this miserable way is taken by the sorry souls of those who lived without disgrace and without praise. Well, how do you get disgraces comes to those who operate out of love because the world sees that operation as antithetical, as foolishness, as a scandal, and so they get trod upon. But they also don't get praise because they never really did what was right and what was best for those around them, and so nobody's going to praise them either. So these people end up being the sort of like miserable souls that didn't operate out of love. They were always those who just did things for themselves or did
Just
things
dance.
trying to get behind the right cause all the time.
Yeah.
I I think maybe that's an answer to the question. Is that it's a question about doing the thing out of love, not out of
Right.
supporting your
Yeah,
cause come hell or high water.
that's exactly right. Could you scroll
I'm
down
thinking.
a little bit? The next text from 40 onward, because he talks now
Yeah,
in,
sure, yeah.
yeah, in Dante, yeah.
Are you reading the?
Further. So right, it's now joined not
Yeah,
only
yeah.
the human souls, but the angels, he says here. Right. Dice volte molto
Mm.
breve. Questi non hanno speranza di morte e che
Down
cieca
here.
vita è tanto basso che invidiosi son d'ogni altre sorte. So joined with him are the angels. Where was it? Right. Okay, at the top. Yeah. Now commingle with
Uh,
him the coward angels, the company who were not rebels nor faithful to God, but stood apart on their. It says stood outside on their own. Is the best rendering of the
yeah,
Italian. That the heavens that their
yeah.
beauty not be lessened have cast them out, but neither will hell receive. I love this English translation is really nice. Have cast them out, nor will deep hell receive them, which is exactly what it says in
Right, yeah.
Italian. Even the wicked
Huh.
cannot. Even the wicked won't glory in it.
Profundo inferno.
Right? They can place no
Yeah,
hope in death, and their blind
that's
love
wild.
is so abject that they are envious of every other fate. And that because that is
Yeah,
the temptation, I think, in moments where it seems like you either have to go full Feanor, like you go Denethor, or just stay home and don't do anything, right? That that's what you do on the outside, but on the
Hmm.
inside you envy every other fate. I mean, I think that's you go blind. You say, what am I supposed to? What it's that same
Oh,
complaint when we hear a lot of parents do this. Well, kids on the devices and God knows what ideologies, program. But what do you do? Maybe the kids are all doing crack these days. But what are you going to do? What are you supposed to do? It's the times. I wish I could do it, but what can you do? Um, you're blind. You literally, that's that moment of blindness, and you're
Yeah.
envious of every other fate.
Yeah.
That's what the one thing that Frodo expresses for a moment when he's trying to. This is the conundrum, and it's at least the way that it's expressed in the movie. Everybody knows this because it's actually very well done in the film, Jackson's film. In Moria, right? Frodo's saying, "I wish it hadn't happened in my time." And Gandalf says, "So do all who live in times such as these, right? But
Oh
it's not
yeah.
up to us to pick the times, but to choose what we can do with the time that is given to us." Is that what Gandalf says is the correct answer to that temptation to envy every other sorte, every other fate, every other um, challenge. Yeah, fate is a good thing. Chance, every other challenge,
Mm.
every other way the die could fall, right? I wish it was this guy. I wish it was that guy. I wish, if only this, if only that. We get stuck in that space, um, which
Mm.
just keeps us blind and abject, um, where we can have no hope in anything, not even death, because that too would be absurd,
And
right? I mean, to quote like Camus.
right, right, right. And Feanor dies in a very profound way that stands as a sort of cautionary tale to everybody else around him. So he's not a fence sitter by any means. He's
Hmm.
definitely what we would say the hot end of the
Yeah.
spectrum, right? Not the cold end of the spectrum. Um, but another character comes up to me in the lore who is very envious and could have died a very unknown fate. Nobody
Yes.
would remember him. I mean, imagine, I'm talking about Gollum here. Imagine if Gollum had crept under the earth and never been found by Bilbo. Nobody would remember this character. I mean, the ring would have been completely gone. Nobody would remember him. He would have died there in his little hole eventually, and maybe be found thousands and thousands of years later by somebody else. But nobody would remember him. And he is very envious. He's very blind in the sense that he lives in the dark down there like a caical fish almost. And the only reason that people remember him
Right.
is because he comes out hunting for the ring. He's driven like Feanor. He's driven to go get the precious, and that drives him to the point even of eventually snatching the ring or biting the ring off of Frodo's finger, and thus being the sort of I suppose
Yeah.
unwilling, I suppose, savior of Middle Earth, which we could debate at a future date, but he ends up being one of these hot characters that you remember as a cautionary tale. He's not
Right.
sitting the
He,
fence.
in
He's neither
fact,
hot nor
he
cold.
dies like
Characters.
his body.
So
Um, Body's consumed in fire and ash, borne away like smoke. Um, or the
yes, yes, or
Maeder,
not to
exactly.
give away the plot, but
Yes,
Medros
cast into
does that
the
later on with one
fire.
of the Silmarillions. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it's wild too that it has this thing
Yeah.
here where it's like there are coward angels. Like, how does that work? How are there coward angels? Right? They wouldn't rebel, but they also weren't faithful. They wouldn't stand up for God, but they weren't They weren't rebellious either. That's really, huh? It's almost like you can see the rebel angels being like, get 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 hacked, God. We're out of here, And God's like, no, you're not going to assault our citadel. And there's this clash going on, and there's these angels standing by, like, should we do something? I don't know. And both the Satan and God are like, go away, you guys. You're completely worthless to us. Just kind of like finding them a nuisance and swatting them away or something.
It is,
That's
yeah.
kind of a wild image there that Dante brings up. Um, Even the wicked cannot glory in them. That's amazing. So anyway, yeah, it's a good answer to the question though. To think about it, is with Fanor, had he been a different character, had he been somebody who loved correctly rather than loving the works of his own hands and loving his own pride and loving his own skill, he
Hmm.
he could have ended up being a much more glorious character. And maybe it was just that he didn't live long enough to do so. I don't know. I mean, somebody like Gladriel, for instance, who's lived so long and made
Yeah.
certain mistakes, maybe she has been a character who has
That's
changed
that's an
because she
interesting
has
point.
lived long
Well, I
enough to
mean, yeah,
learn.
at Feanor lived another
But
5 to 10,000 years. Maybe he too would have, you know, come around to
Yeah.
Galadriel or Elrond status. But that's really interesting. But it comes down to
Yeah.
then, like you
But
said, and I think this is the great, you're probably like the final thoughts, the moment like that, just to come back to that main point that you said. And in
yep.
times like these, which I think holds true at the present moment of recording and for the foreseeable future, for those watching out there in Radioland, is that, you know, how do you avoid becoming either Denethor on the one hand or um, a lukewarm being vomited out with no, complete ennui, blindness, abject, envying every other fate, meaningless existence? How do you avoid one of these two poles? It's by, like you said, you have to get yourself into a place where finally, like Aragorn, your heart speaks clearly, and you act out of love for the people who are
Hmm.
right here, right now, the people around you, to do what you can for them. I think that
Hmm.
keep your mind in that place, and even maybe keep
Yeah.
yourself in that place, and don't overthink, because that I think drives us either to cowardice or despair. Whether that's the despair of
Yeah.
Denethor or the despair of running away, you have to live
Seems to be
by
the
love.
only way to live.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yep. Live not by lies, live by love. That's a good way. Good way to close out, I think.
Thank you, sir.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you, sir. Good discussion today.